Hello, I'm Tina White with the Asheville View. I'm joined today by two local leaders, Rebecca Chaplim and Ann Miller-Woodford. Rebecca is the Associate State Director of AARP in the North Carolina Mountain region. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Tina. Hi, Ann.
Hi.
And Ann Miller-Woodford is a visual artist, designer, and entrepreneur, and a very creative person no matter what she's working on. How are you doing, Ann?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Tina.
I'm glad to have you both here. So we're here to talk about a really exciting upcoming event that AARP is producing, and that, Ann, you are featured in, Actively Aging Through Activism and Art. Rebecca, tell us about the series and the event.
Well, this was born really of our members, our AARP members, and their concern about racial injustice in our community. And they were saying to me and to our fellow volunteers, what's mine to do? How am I supposed to get involved in being active for racial justice in our community? And from there was born a series of events in 2020. And that featured local Black men and women to speak to that question, what is mine to do? So as we move into 2021, we still realize there's a lot to do. And a part of what there is to do is to start by understanding our history and where we come from. I was talking with my colleague, Joanna Greer-McGeechan with ABIPA, and I said, it would be great if we could do something that highlighted Black history in Western North Carolina. Do you know anyone, Joanna, who might be able to speak to that? And she said, oh, I know exactly the person who can speak to that. And we found a treasure. We found Ann Miller-Woodford, who is the one to help us understand our history so that we can also take shape, we can create our future together. So with that, I will pass the baton to Ann to say a little bit more about what we're looking forward to.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Rebecca. My work is to make the invisible visible in far Western North Carolina. What that means is that there are so few African Americans in this region. About 1.6% or less of us are Black people. We have really helped to create a great community here. We have been a group of people who've been very, very excited about working with other people across the lines of race. My idea is that we should build bridges. We want to tear down all those walls that divide us and build bridges between the groups, whether it's religion, national origin, whatever the walls are. To me, it's very important for us to work together. I founded a group called One Dozen Who Care. And One Dozen Who Care, we put together a multicultural women's development conference that worked to pull people together, to empower women, to make sure that we learn about education and entrepreneurship and health, all those things. And because of this virus that we have right now, we're working to try to put together a virtual conference for this year. We've had people over the last 20 years who have come through this conference almost every year. It's exciting to me to work toward building a community of across the lines of race. And we've had many, many races of people come together for our women's conference. I do my artwork based on my experiences in life, which is most of my artwork is African-American faces, people, places where we've lived. So it's all about building up the knowledge that people have about who we are. I wrote the book, When All God's Children Get Together, a celebration of the lives and music of African-American people in far Western North Carolina, to highlight the lives of folks who, if it weren't for this book, would pass away and no one would ever know about them. My father had a fantastic memory, and he told me a lot of stories about how our people arrived in this region. There was an ethnic or racial cleansing in Cumming, Georgia in 1912, and my grandfather ended up coming to Andrews and forming a community there. And that community, his cousin named Happy Top. So that's where I grew up. Went to a segregated elementary school. There was no place to go after that for us because the schools were closed to us. And so I ended up going to Asheville to Allen High School. That is started my life, opened up my life and my mind to the world. I went from there to college because they insisted that every one of the Black girls who lived in that boarding school in Asheville applied to and was accepted at college. And so I went to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and got my Bachelor of Arts degree there.
So at this event, will you be talking about the book? Will you be talking about your activism, or what will someone tune in for?
I have to talk about both.
Okay.
The book is all about activism. One Dozen Who Care is the organization that I founded when I returned. I had gone away to California to live because there were no jobs for me in Western North Carolina at the time, in the area where I lived in Cherokee County. My father, I was with my mother and father. My mother had cancer, so I came back from California. And when I arrived back in the community, I found the women, the African-American women, working very hard individually to try to uplift and help the community. So I talked to them and we pulled together an organization of 12 women called One Dozen Who Care. That's the activism. Through One Dozen Who Care, I wrote an application, a grant application to the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area, and they gave us financing to help get the book researched. I did the research for a couple of years with funding from the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area, and then I volunteered my own time and went out all over the community to pick up information as much as I could. My father, as I mentioned, had a fantastic memory, and he told me stories, and I researched his stories, and that's how I put together the book. So there's no separation between the activism and the author and the art. It's all together.
Good answer. Well spoken. Rebecca, I know that there are some other events planned that are part of this series. Could you talk a little bit about what those will be?
Yeah, as Anne mentioned, Anne's life, Anne's story is part of the story. So really, we want to initiate and open this up with an understanding of the possibilities and empowerment and struggles and triumphs that Anne has gone through. And we want to follow that with a book club series. So that will be an opportunity for people to really dive into this treasure of a book that Anne has written, compiled, and dive deeper into what that means for us individually. So there will be discussion on different aspects of our history, our background, and also really answer that question, what is mine to do, so that we can understand more about how our role in creating more justice in our communities. And do you want to talk at all about any of the specific weekly sessions that we're going to do?
We will talk about racial issues, how that affects all of us. We will talk about even white privilege, which is a little bit of a tough row to hoe, as I say sometimes. But we all need to understand that each one of us has privilege of some kind. And so hopefully when I explain my privilege and the privilege of those around us, maybe white people will not be upset by hearing the word white privilege. That's one thing that I think is very important.
You know, I was curious, one of the other stories I've been following this week is the death of Reverend Dr. Mosley. I don't know if you know him. He was a pastor here at Nazareth for 50 years. He graduated from Stevens Lee in 57. And one of my neighbors just knocked on my door and said, "Did you hear that Reverend Mosley died?" And I said, no. He said, did you know him? And I said, just through you, because you talk about him all the time. And she said, he was such a great man. We've lost a great man. And what I picked up on that, in addition to him passing, I think she was mourning the passage of a generation. These are now my words. I've been talking to a number of people in his church and in the community that he's worked with, and they kept talking about how before urban renewal, or earlier urban renewal, because that's been going on for a long time, but everyone knew each other because you'd walk in the churches and the community and the school, and everything was so connected, and that he was a minister. Part of what made him stand out in today's world was he did know everyone. So he connected generations, parents, grandparents, and children, and because he knew what all of them had done. And it doesn't seem to be present anymore. And I was just curious if, I don't know whether you knew Reverend Mosley, but otherwise I'd love your observations on if you see a shift in the world that you lived in generationally, and even just within the Black community, people who are, say, in their 20s.
We called him Doc. Doc Mosley was the moderator of the Waynesville Missionary Baptist Association, or the education leader when I was young, very young. And it's hard to believe that, he's gone, because it's almost like he's one of those people that you thought would live forever. Doc Mosley, my sister who passed away, knew him well out there with the Hill Street Baptist Church and the work with Reverend Avery and all. And so she knew him. We all called him Doc because in the Baptist church, many times folks who have a doctorate degree, or they may be called Doc because of the knowledge they have, the experiences they have, and their leadership. So he was a powerful leader, and we surely will miss him. There are others who are coming along behind that follow in his footsteps, but you cannot replace footsteps like he made, because when I was a child, the roads weren't that easy to travel, but he came down to Andrews, Murphy, all over the place to do his educational teaching for us. And we'll always be grateful to him. He's not in my book because I wrote the book based on Haywood County back to Cherokee County.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the insights I've received from you, Anne, is, and one of your goals is to encourage Black people in rural America to write down their stories, to tell their stories, because without this intergenerational messages and sharing is lost. And so I think it fits in well to that vision as a reminder to all of us to keep history alive, keep the story alive.
Absolutely, because so many of our rural areas don't have people who have confidence in their ability to write. There I was hearing my dad's stories for years and never thought to write it down. And I am qualified to write it. And so I decided that I would go to the churches. I went to all the meetings that I could. I announced that I was writing the book and asked people for photographs and stories. And I wrote their stories because many of them would say, well, I can't write that. I don't know anything about how to write a story like that. So I wrote it together for them. I mean, I worked with them to write their stories. So when an older person in the community passes away, a whole library of information goes with them. And so it was very important for me to work with these people, to go to the church meetings, to stand up and talk with them about it. And then later, after I wrote the book, I worked with Pam Meister out at the Mountain Heritage Center at Western Carolina University, and we put together a traveling exhibit that has panels. Those panels are now being shown at the Smith McDowell House Museum through April in Asheville. It travels all around, and people now can see themselves, their family members, and it's exciting to folks. And not only that, but it's like a reunion. Sometimes people call me from distances, not knowing who their family members were until they saw the book. So that really excites me. And I want all the people around that can hear about the stories in the rural areas to write their stories. And if they want to give it to somebody else to polish it, that's fine. But I just love telling the stories of our people.
I'd like to touch on that because I actually found an oral history of Dr. Mosley through, I think it was the Carolina Room at Pack Library. And that was neat. I was disappointed, though. It seemed to be a fairly sparse collection. Where should people turn to if they want to share their story?
It's very difficult for African American people. The churches sometimes have some stories, but we usually have to turn to oral history for those. And that's why I had to write the book. Right. I'm an artist and I wanted to do my artwork, but I had to stop for those 7 years and mostly work on the book because it had to be written. And now it's going to be out there for everybody. The book is now on Amazon. And it's on other places that in the libraries now throughout Western North Carolina. So it's exciting that folks will be able to go there and find their family members, or at least someone that they can go back and track down. Yeah, it's very important. Oral history was the main way that our history was saved in this region, because there was a problem with education. I went to the Andrews Colored Negro School. For 4 years, it was called Andrews Colored School. Then it was Andrews Negro School. I had 4 teachers during that time. My last teacher was the best. She was my favorite because she took my artwork, sent it to the county fairs, to Scholastic Art Awards on her own, with her own money, so that I would win gold keys and blue ribbons. And she encouraged us. She also she went to college every year, every summer, so that she could come back and bring us the latest information. When I went away to high school, I was not behind in any manner.
My neighbor across the street was a little annoyed by our street used to be all black and now it's mostly white. And one of the white residents just said, I don't remember, something that was a little bit ignorant. And so she, in response, she wrote down every address in the street and which families had lived there before, and used that as an educational tool for the neighborhood, which people loved. They did not mind being educated. And just, I share that because that was something as simple as just writing names. Didn't require a lot. Another one, there was a reunion before I was here at Stumptown, which was a neighborhood in just north of Asheville. And they had a big reunion, and I'd seen the reunion picture before, but someone took and hand wrote and then digitized. They wrote the names below everyone. And it was so cool to see that. And then you could see all the family names. And yet, so there's a lot you can do, a lot of creative ways to capture stuff before it's lost.
Oh, yes. And I hope we'll do it. That's what I'm doing. Thank you, Rebecca, for making this possible for me to get out there and encourage folks to write their stories or even record it and let someone else write it for them.
And
go ahead, Rebecca.
I just go back to that original thought, what is mine to do? Obviously Ann Miller Woodford did what is hers to do and continues to do that. And Tina White and the Asheville View is certainly doing what is theirs to do. And I invite those viewing today or listening to join us so that we can uncover the history that we really haven't been aware of and go deeper into that question. What is mine to do to create a community that is connected, that fosters justice?
Well, I will be there, and we will have a link to your book and to the event, and I can't wait for it. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.